SOPs we need to follow. So first of all, what is audit? Audit is that to check the whether the protection of information systems is working and it is in place from theft or damage. Suppose you have installed a device in your network, it kind of a router, it can be of a firewall, it can be of a switch or any other network security device. So you made some policies or made some rules on that, but to check that rules and policies are working fine and they can stop or they are not vulnerable and your device is not vulnerable, to check all the things you need to do the audit. Audit can be done on the operating system level, on the hardware level, on the network level, and on the application level. Right? Suppose you have a device like switch, you have a Cisco device installed in your organization that is a manageable switch, and there is a Cisco iOS is running on that, and its iOS is not updated. You have installed, the device is placed, but that device is not updated to its operating system. So the system will also prompt that there is update is available, but somehow we forget to update that and we miss that update. So to check that whether the system is updated and it's running its updated operating system, we need to do the audit of devices, also of operating system which is running on that device, on the application level, on the hardware level also. What is theft or damage of the information? Earlier, data is stored in books and stored in the almirahs and written on the papers and stored in almirahs, and there's a physical security is also there. But nowadays, information is all stored in our computers. So there are three main paradigms of security, that is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These are the main three factors which are calculated at the time of any security. Like you have a mail server installed on your working in an organization, and you are doing daily mails on that. That mail server is available. The criteria of the availability of that mail server should be high. It means it will run all the time in the organization, but it's not circulating any confidential mail of your organization. It doesn't have contain any confidential data of the organization. It's just circulating the task to their employees, but availability is high. So on the security point of view, they will work on the availability factor. If it's running, the mail server is running with the confidential data and there's the processes are in between them, then you will work on the confidentiality factor. These are the three major paradigms which is work for any type of security, whether we are talking about physical security, whether we talk about network security, application security, any security will work on three paradigms only. For example, ensuring that data is not lost when critical issues arise. Natural disasters, computer server malfunction, physical theft, or any other instance where data has the potential of being lost. Since we already told that information is stored on computers, in these days, information assurance is typically dealt with by the IT security specialist, how the process, how the data is saved. If the data is flowing, it must ensure that there is no man in the middle attack, there is no integrity happen, the data is not lost in between. So that all the things is done by your IT specialist. A common method of providing information assurance is an off-site backup. Like you have running a data center in the organization and you are storing all the things on that site only. It happens that somehow your data center is down for some time and you didn't create any DR site for that, recovery site for that. That will calculate a downtime for the data center. Whenever you create any device, you must create its configuration file and the backup of that configuration file must. You take the backup of the configuration file and store it somewhere else, not in the same site. That will help you to, again, if some happen, if device is not working properly and your device is crashed, then you can create the device from that backup file easily. That backup file help you. That backup file help you to create the same scenario which is running already in the organization. Security. The security is to check what are the system and network threats, how the cryptography can be used, and how user authentication is running, implementing security defenses, firewalling to protect systems and the network. How security can be done in your organization. That is the main motive to do the audit. Audit will let you know what are the gaps are in the network. What are the vulnerabilities are present on your network, on a device, how the process flows, how the data flows. So everything is done in the audit, whether it's of your network audit, whether it's of your operating system audit, whether it's of your application audit. It will let you know the gaps of that application which is running. Suppose you have a server which having a operating system, updated server 2019 server is running on that, and you have also patched that operating system. That means there is no vulnerability present in that operating system, and it is updated by Microsoft patch also. But you installed some application on that, like suppose that is running a web server and it's running a Apache web server and with the older version, which having some vulnerabilities, which can exploit your system. So both the things, operating system level and that application which is running on that server should be updated. And that server which is running, it's also configured with your NTP, Network Time Protocol. It's play a major role for securing and syncing of your logs. Whenever an event is fired or any kind of event is happened, any theft is happened on your system, if there is no NTP or your time syncing is not working, it will generate a random time and you cannot forensics to that event. Vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are the loopholes of your network, of your operating systems. It also, you can say that there is a backdoor which is created by any user intentionally or unintentionally to hack your system, to check, to crack your system, to exploit your system and log into your system, to change some files, to steal some data. So to check all the things, the audit should be done. The vulnerabilities are present in the network and individual devices that make up the network. Networks are typically protected by three primary vulnerabilities or weakness. We'll discuss it about. First is technology weakness. Computer and network technologies have intrinsic security weaknesses. These include TCP/IP protocol weaknesses, operating system weaknesses, and network equipment weaknesses. If we are running a protocol on our device and that protocol is vulnerable and that is opened by any user that can access that device, means there is a gap is created on that device that can be create a vulnerability that can exploit your system by an unauthorized user. A user opened the port number 23 and forgot to close that port after using all the services, then the device is open for the attack, because telnet port is not a secure port. Instead of telnet, they need to use the SSH. That is more secure than that, because it's creating the encrypted connection with that secure shell. The second type of weaknesses are configuration weaknesses. The device is placed and you configure the device, but the configuration is not as good as anybody can make the device to be attackable. TCP/IP protocol weaknesses are including in the configuration file. I will let you know what kind of policies you can take care of the things. How the device, when you install a device in the organization, what are the prerequisites for that? And after installing and after placing the device in the organization, the network, what you need to do, how you can secure your devices. There should be an authentication level for your devices, authentication and authorization level for the devices. Who can access that device, when can access that device, and what policies can prefer to do for that user. Network security weaknesses. As we discussed that some protocols are not secure, like telnet protocol is not secure. HTTP protocol is not secure. FTP is not secure. Whenever the data is traversed, they traverse the clear data, clear text. If you want to check, you just open a port of HTTP on your web server and try to send a username password via that HTTP and open up the Wireshark and capture that packets which is sending in the HTTP request, and you will find that a username and the password will be written in the clear text. Instead of HTTP, we can use the HTTPS protocol. SNMP protocol is running, but if you want to use the SNMP and the requirement of the organization that they need to run the SNMP, there must be SNMP version 3 is used and SMTP protocol is running, that is port number 25. If your system is running the SMTP protocol port number 25 and you are not using that protocol, you must close that port. In the audit process, they will analyze all the devices, the device which is running the operating system and operating system vulnerabilities, and let you know that how these vulnerabilities can affect your system and how to close that vulnerability. Network equipment weaknesses. There are number of devices, network devices are present. It can be router, it can be switch, it can be a firewall, proxy server. There are a number of devices. Next generation firewall can be there. IDS, IPS can be there. You install a device, but you did not create any policies on that. Then that device is not working perfectly. How the policies, how the blacklist, how the whitelist are working, how they communicating with the WAN to LAN and LAN to WAN, which users are communicating and which applications are used on the internet, on the intranet. And also the device having its own configuration also. If you want to maintain that device, you want to configure that device, you need to access with the password. How the password policy is working in the organization, which is the password policy is running, and how they maintaining it. You create a password policy, whether it's implemented or not, whether they are maintaining, and every user in the organization know about that password policy is running. This is written in the password policy that the password should be more than 8 characters, not less than 8 characters, and it is a combination of alphabets, numerics, and the special symbols. You create a policy, but the policy is not followed by every user. And how you get to know that the policy is created but not implemented? It will be done in the audit process. You can find in the audit process. The person will audit your network, your servers, your desktops also, and the users' devices, and will audit with that policies which is created by the organization that are perfectly placed and running and maintaining by users also. Lack of authentication, routing protocols, and network holes. See, lack of authentication. You create a, there's a device that is a firewall which having the policies, number of policies are created, and you restrict the users to open the social network websites. But the password of that device is very weak. They just get the password with a brute force attack. Brute force attack is a dictionary based attack which sends the number of dictionary words at a designated IP with a username. Like suppose we have a firewall and its username is admin. Admin username is a common username which is created on all devices. But they never disable that admin user. That admin user always be disabled on every network device, and you try to create a new user with a new name with a strong password. Configuration weakness. Network administrator need to learn what the configuration weakness is. Configuration weakness is you create a wireless router, Wi-Fi is running in the organization, and that is open for everybody. Anybody can access that Wi-Fi router. So that means that is a configuration weakness. You just secure it, but the password is 12345. That is a common password. When you install a BSNL router or a Airtel router, they create a username as an admin and a password is also admin, or password is password. They never change it. Same in some organization, they install a Wi-Fi access, that Wi-Fi router, but that is not secured. The username is the admin and the password is the organization name at 123. It can be anything. That is a simple password. They create a simple password for that. Whenever you place a device, that should having a strong configuration of that device. Every account information might be transmitted insecurely across the network, exposing username and the password to the snoopers. Like they are using some unsecured protocols and they're revealing the information while transferring the data from one place to another. Like I gave you example that you are running the HTTP and in the Wireshark, they capture the packages and will get the know the information that there is a username and the password is in the clear text. System accounts with easily guessed passwords. As I told you that passwords, we not create a strong passwords for our devices. We use the passwords in the clear text form. Let me give you another example. We're having a Cisco router or a switch in our organization. We create a configuration, good configuration, that is a secured one. HTTP is not running on that, HTTPS is running on that, and they are running the SSH protocol, not the not the telnet. But when you download the configuration file, you find that your password is written in the clear text. Whenever the auditor audit any device, they get the configuration file from that organization and they read and review that configuration file with the tools as well as with the manual. Cisco device will let you know that this user is working with this clear text password. It is not encrypted by MD5 encryption. That will occur in the audit process. That configuration file they are sharing, that is a secured one or not. Misconfigured internet service. This is a very general problem that is to turn on JavaScript in the web browser, enabling attacks by the way of hostile JavaScript when accessing untrusted sites. IIS, Apache, FTP, and terminal services are also pose problems. Because you execute the Apache server or you execute SSH, the secure shell on a switch to configure it. To harden that system for the best practices, if you want that your service SSH is running, but it is not easily, it cannot easily judge by any attacker or hacker, you can just change the port of that SSH service. Instead of port 22, you can use any random port for that. SSH will work, but not on the port number 22 with any user defined port. There are number of ports available. Unsecure default setting within the products. Whenever you install a device and you didn't change any its configuration and it's running on its default configuration, and that device can create security loopholes. Misconfigured network equipment. Misconfiguration of the equipment itself can cause significant security problems. For example, misconfigured access list, routing protocols, and SNMP community. Misconfiguration or lack of encryption and remote access controls can also cause significant security issues. as can the practice of leaving ports open on the switch. Let me give you an example. Suppose you have a server and the server is audited by a auditee and it just execute the command netstat-an. It shows that there are number of ports are open on that machine which are not in use. They are running number of ports, but these ports are not in use. Nobody is using that ports. And they forget to close it. It can happen on the server side, it can happen on the network device also. If you want to check which ports are running on the remote side, you can execute the command nmap. This is a command line version, and for the nmap, the GUI version is zenmap. You can use any one of them, and IP. After that, the nmap, just write down the IP to check which ports are open on that machine. This is also the part of audit, which ports are open and why they are open that port. Let me show you a SOP of a router. See, the first one is latest stable software version shall be selected. It means whenever you install a router, till it gets the updates, you need to update that device, that router. You can check with the execution of the command show version, or if you are running with the web console, it will let you know with the software version. And also in the downloads, it also let you know that it's updated till date or it's having some updates that are not installed. Whenever you log into that device, it will let you know. Host name shall not reveal make model of that device. Like suppose we have a Cisco router and we create a host name is written with the model name Cisco 7610. It means if the device reveals its model number, it's also possible that we can judge that with this model is installed which iOS on that. And with knowing of that iOS, we can also get the vulnerabilities which can present on that iOS. So host name should not reveal any kind of information. Each user shall be allocated a separate login account. And every user have different policies and authentication and authorization. And if you have number of devices in the organization, you must make sure that there is a radius server or a TACA server, that is centralized authentication server, should be placed in the organization. That will help you for the accessibility of the user, the authorization of the user, which files and what kind of authority the user have, which level of the authentication the user can get, whether it's getting the read only permissions, whether it's get read and write permission to that device. Password shall be managed by the password management guidelines, and also password shall be stored in the encrypted form. As I told you that we create a password policy and we hardened with the password to the device, but we forgot that the password should be stored in the encrypted form. There's a command in a Cisco that you can encrypt the password also. Whenever a user or whenever you back up that configuration file, it will not write the password in the clear text. The password should be stored in the encrypted form. NTP shall be configured on the devices. Network time protocol should be configured on the devices. So with that NTP, the logs that will create with the NTP network time protocol accordingly. It should be synced with that NTP. Banner message warning message should be displayed before login as a caution. One more thing, MOTD, message of the day, and banner, both will displayed and both will configured at the time of the login. Whether you are logging to a server, whether you are logging to a network device. It should display that what kind of device is this and how they can access that device. Protocol or services using encrypted channel, SSH or HTTPS, RDP, used for here if you want to configure via remote services. The telnet service must disable on it. If you are running with the SSH, take care of that. The SSH version 2 or more will be used. There are number of interfaces, network interfaces in the router. The interfaces which are not in use, that must be disabled. And other thing is backup of the device. Backup of the configuration file should be stored on some other site. So if somehow the system or device is crashed, you can regenerate its configuration file from the backup. Log should be maintained. There should be a policy of log retention, how and where the logs are saved, and for how much days. For checking console and other direct access ports connection of the router, how the router can access console is running or whether it's any aux port is running. This is a SOP for router. You can create a SOP for your firewall also. Let me show you for the switch. Switch and router. Some commands are similar, like version should be updated, host name should not reveal, and it must be configured with the NTP. Default admin user should be disabled. And if we talk about in the operating system, there is a guest user that should also be disabled because it doesn't have any password. One thing that is important in this kind of switch, that switch should be configured with the VLAN, that you can distinguish with both different networks of one is a management network and other is an intranet network. Both networks should be different. You can do with the VLAN. MAC address binding should be configured on switch interfaces for client systems. Security policy weakness. Security policy weakness can create unforeseen security threats. The network can pose security risk to the network if user do not follow the security policy. Weakness, lack of written security policy, how the weakness is exploited. You create a policy for a password, but the policy which is created, that is also weak. So it means whenever you try to harden the device with that referring to that policy, it means your device will also weak. Lack of continuity. Poorly chosen, easily cracked, or default password can allow unauthorized access to the network. Logical access control not applied. You create a server and that server is in place where anybody can access that server, access that hardware. Suppose you created a server that's having the operating system CentOS and it is placed in a public reach, and anybody can restart it, make it shut down so that server cannot be accessible. So make that server is not physically and logically accessed by anyone, by any unauthorized user. Software and hardware installation and changes do not follow the policy. Unauthorized changes to the network topology or installation of unwrapped application create security holes. You have created a policy that nobody install an unauthorized application. But some user download that application and install on the server with the help of USB drive or any device, and that application can create the loopholes on that operating system. If you're having this kind of structure, you must do to configure the Active Directory in the organization. That will help you to control the USB also. That USB can accessed by the user or not. Four levels of security to be protected. One is physical, another is human, operating systems. So physical security, that is the easiest way to steal the data. Access to the root console will often give the user special privileges such as rebooting the system as root from the removable media. As I discussed earlier, that your server is placed in a public reach and it's having a user, or it's having it can be power off or reboot by any user, and it's rebooted from an external device, and if they can reboot the system and boot with the external device, it means they can access the file structure of that system. To harden that system, you need to make sure that there is a bootloader password will be placed on your server machine, whether it's of a Linux machine or Windows machine or any device. General access to the terminals in the computer rooms offer some opportunities for an attacker. There are number of terminals are enabled. In the Windows, like suppose it is some version of Windows are not multi-users. So whenever a user is try to log in via remote, the other user automatically log off. But in the case of Linux operating systems, number of multiple users can access at the same time. But it's only get to know that from the log file which is written at the time of login for the remote, whether it's done with the SSH or with any type of service or telnet it is used to log in that machine. There is some concern that the humans who are allowed access to system be trustworthy. There should be defined the levels of the access to that device, which having the read privileges, who can have the write privileges, how and what time that device can be accessed. However, more and more attacks today are made via social engineering, which basically means fooling trustworthy people into accidentally breaching security, phishing, dumpster diving, or password cracking. Sometimes it also happen that you got a mail that is phishing mail and you share your password on that phishing mail or send your personal details on that. That can also lead to the exploit. That device can access via social engineering attacks. You are typing the password and somebody is watching you and they can read your fingers to check to guess the password. The OS must be protected itself by security breaches such as runaway processes, denial of services, memory access violations, stack overflow flow violations, the launching of program with excessive privileges, and many more. Denial of services, like if I talk about the switch, in the switch, you created the different VLANs and some user, that is unauthenticated user, is tried to execute the DOS attack. You can configure on your switch that if you got a number of packets or huge amount of ping ICMPs on that port, they can close that port for a while. That should be configured on the switch. Or if you're having a firewall, you just get that policies are perfectly written and that policies are audited. And that policies check that how that authentication and authorization is given to which user. Control access by limiting file types accessed by the different user, which MIME types are accessible or allowed. Only on authorized processes can operate on the memory segments, CPU, and other resources. Suppose you're having a Linux machine, and in the Linux machine, there is a command top. Top is a command that is kind of task manager in the Windows. You can renice a process It means you can allocate more CPU and more memory to any process which is running on that operating system. It means to give the priority to that process. They will take the more CPU and more RAM of that system, and the other services, which are the major services running and that server is running for, that services are down in the meanwhile when they are using the more CPU and the memory for the unnecessary processes. Prevent unauthorized access, prevent malicious destruction of data, prevent accidental introduction to inconsistency. OS security, that is a user authentication, user knowledge. OS must be capable of protecting itself from accidental and intentional security breaches. Whenever a server is assigned to a user, that you must know that what are the policies and privacies which are allocated to that user. That user can download the files or not, and if it can download the files, whether it's have the privilege to execute and install that applications on that server. Password attacks. Password can also be vulnerable. Encrypted password must be used, and one-time passwords must be enabled on. Or you can use that the two-factor authentication. You can create the single sign-on also. Two-factor authentication can be do by the RSA counters, or you can execute the OTP sent to the mobile or its mail, so they can access that server or that device. Like if you are working on Amazon Cloud, they provide a Authy, that is an application which create a counter after 30 seconds. And with that counter, you can only log in to your account. Let me show you that SOP again. See, in the switch for checking the iOS version, backup process should happen daily. How the backup is done and where the backup is done. What are the time settings synchronized with the NTP server. For checking the management port access is there on the switch. Banner message is written on the switch. The switch logs should be maintained. And for how long a session is on for a switch or a router or a firewall or any other device. Like suppose you log in today and there is no session timeout is configured in the switch or on the router, on the firewall, on the server, the session is created and that is not closed by that device automatically. You must configure that your session is timeout within 5 minutes. It can defined by a user. Network monitoring option should be there. Password policy and account log policy should be there. You have created a user and after some time that user is left the job from the organization, you should disable his or her account from that device, and means that user cannot access the device from the outside also. If you have created a VPN for that user, you must disable the VPN. and he or she left the job. So I am concluding my session here. If any query, you can post in the chat or you can post in the group also.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Atul. Thank you so much.